Hey there, School of Rock family. This is Chris Kopp, the music director from School of Rock Santa Ana. Today I sit down with longtime friend and keyboardist for the United States Navy Band, Drew Williams. We talk about piano, keyboards, synthesizers, a little bit of his music history and how he came to be the keyboardist for United States Navy bands. Talk about music education and what we think is the best way to be educated and why School of Rock has the best music education system out there. We appreciate you stopping by and checking out this video on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, wherever you found us. Please give us a like and a subscribe. And remember SOR, Santa Ana on all those platforms. Enjoy the video, and if you really like it, leave a comment and share for your friends. Thank you so much.
Well, hi. Thanks for having me, Chris. My name is Drew Williams, and I've been a professional musician for 16 years now and been playing for 30 years. I turned 35 this year. And I'm a keyboardist and sometimes a vocalist, background vocalist for the U.S. Navy Band here in San Diego. And it's been a great opportunity for me to make a good living, support my country all through music. And it's been quite a wild ride. And I'm happy to support School of Rock and Chris Kopp here at School of Rock Santa Ana on their new beginning. And it's just really, really awesome to see a new chapter of musicians come into play, Chris.
How'd you get into music? Did you have an education? How'd you get into it?
Yeah, I was an only child, still am, I guess. And the piano was kind of more or less my best friend. Okay. And I was, my parents got me a piano when I was 5 years old. And I just kind of sat there and started kind of figuring what goes well with what. And I think that's the beginning that a lot of instrumentalists take with especially piano and guitar being the most accessible and the most universal of the instruments, in my opinion. And so I sat with the piano. I figured out that, a C chord goes with an F chord, goes with the G chord. And I think in guitar, you do the same thing, only with E, A, and B. Sure. But I learned that there was a language to this, and even though I put it in my own terms, not having music theory as a 5-year-old, I quickly figured out, okay, there's a method to this, and there's a construction. So I just started listening to TV commercials, movie soundtracks, anything that was audio and musical, and without knowing it, I was already kind of transcribing before any formal education by scale degree, almost for everything. And then when I learned that what I was doing was completely correct and completely the way to, learn by ear and transcribing through scale degree, I was like, wow, I've been doing it right naturally this whole time. And now all I have to do is assign numbers to these pitches. And it all works out. And it's also been a little bit of a curse because I can't turn it off. I don't have perfect pitch, but I have very good relative pitch. And whenever I hear anything, if I can find the tonal center, I can play it in any key just by transcribing by scale degree. So that's been a really big help when I'm learning new tunes for rock bands or whatever the cause may be. I don't have to sit and think about it. It's already kind of more or less learned. And then if I can apply a genre or anything else on top of that, then there you go. But that was my primary education. And then I was fortunate enough to go to one of the best public schools in the country, Carmel High School in Carmel, Indiana. Our performing arts program was quite large, if not the largest in the state, one of them. We had a band program of over 400 students. The marching band program there, led by Dr. Richard Saucedo, staff arranger for Hal Leonard, has always won grand national championships with Bands of America, at least 5 or 6 in the last 2 decades. Carmel High School is a big name in music, of course, also with its proximity to Indiana University. Okay. I took the audition to be in the U.S. Navy bands when I was a senior in high school, 2 months before I graduated. I was accepted, and then I had a nice senior summer, and then I went to basic training And 16 years later, here I am.
Here you are. Yeah, man. So you mentioned, and School of Rock is also kind of on this same path where we use a song first approach, where we teach the songs first. We get kids to learn the music and listen to it and the stuff that they like to hear and then play it. And then on the back end of that, after they're already, playing music and excited about it, then we talk about the theory. Then we're like, hey, this C chord goes with this F chord, goes with this G chord, whatever. What kind of value do you think is in that? If you went back, would you change anything? What would you add to that? Like how do you think about that you came through that way versus, learning the sheet music first or learning the reading first, that kind of stuff?
I think as a contemporary musician and a very successful professional contemporary musician as myself now, that is absolutely the way to do it. Mm-hmm. If you intend on making music your career, or if you just want to have the skills of music and all that comes with the skills of any performing arts, whether it be, for example, I've got a very good friend who's a Harvard graduate that is an engineering executive with GM and has retired a multimillionaire, and who is a very good piano player. And also great friends who can play guitar or sing or play piano and have $1 million sales contracts through marketing just because they were able to break the ice through music. The list is endless of what the value of music is. And with everything, our society being so pop driven now, the value of learning through the song, as School of Rock does, is exactly what I was doing starting when I was 5 years old. And I learned all the nuts and bolts afterward. Now, the key for me was my curiosity never stopped. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to learn the theory behind what I was doing naturally. Right. But the fact that I was just learning the song, loving the song, and then playing the song first in its most simplest organic form, like School of Rock Santa Ana does, that's how I did it, and that's why I'm successful. I live in Southern California. I have a wife and a daughter, never been happier, and now I get to live an hour away from my best friend, Chris Kopp. So what more can you say about that,
Nothing much. And you got a whole beautiful amount of racks and racks of gear back there you've been able to amass over the career,
This is about half of it, and there's another bank over there, and then the closet. So, yeah.
Synth players, man, you keyboard guys, you got a lot of plugs and knobs and switches and all that kind of stuff, man. What kind of gear you work with? What are some of your favorites? What do you like?
Well, it's funny because I think the guitar players have always been notorious for their pedals, right? And the whole pedal board thing. And now, I know what you play with. You've got some you still using the Line 6 stuff?
I have, I've got a really nice Line 6 rig that I use. I've also got a couple different analog rigs. I also have amassed some gear over the years. It tends to happen,
I was saying, I think, the guitarist, it seems like their whole world is shrinking down into this awesome, brilliant Line 6 type box. And then the synth players have kind of gone the other way. But I don't know which came first, Chris, historically, the chicken or the egg when it came to gear or gear acquisition syndrome. But you look at some of the great synth players when prog was just starting up, and then you've got John Lord and Keith Emerson and Chick Corea with their massive racks. Herbie, of course. It's quite an undertaking. I could probably talk about synth history for a few months. Sure. But my favorite gear, I've got a board here. It's the Moog Voyager OS, and that was released in the early 2000s along with their Voyager series. But before they did the re-release most recently of the Mini Moog Model D, they created the Voyager OS. And the OS stands for old school. It has no presets. It has that classic Moog sound, very, very smooth, and is completely analog, deductive synthesizer from the Moog company. That was my first synthesizer, and it's also the most expensive one I had. I think MSRP was $3,600, and I think I was 20 years old when I bought that, and I took out a personal loan with a very high interest rate to get that synthesizer, and then took it all the way all around Asia with me.
Oh, wow. That's awesome, man. You still using that one today? You like that one a lot.
I use all my gear. I think when you have this much, they're like little babies. And then on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, I was a child of the 80s and had really started to get into pop on the tail end of the 80s, if not the early 90s. And one of the most famous sounds of that era was the Yamaha DX7 keyboard. And that was one of the first frequency modulation synthesizers. And it was so hard for even the professionals to program at that time. They just kept using one of the few dozen of presets that came in the cartridges of this DX7. So that's why in the late 80s and 90s, you had a lot of the sounds that kind of sounded the same, a lot of the bell type things and electric pianos from that board. But Yamaha recently, within the past 8 years, I want to say, did a re-release of those called the Reface series. And the Reface DX is a little synthesizer. It's all original frequency modulation. I think the tag on it is maybe $250, $300. It has mini keys, and even a guy with kind of bigger hands, I don't have a problem navigating the mini keys. I love the sounds. It also has MIDI, so I can connect it to my larger controllers if I want to do that there. But I think those are kind of two ends of the entire spectrum of over the 30 keyboards and drum machines that I have. You've got one that's $3,000 and you got one that's 300, and I love them really both equally.
Okay. Yeah. So, and guitars are kind of the same way. You get these, you can have awesome instruments that cost a whole bunch of money, and you can have awesome instruments that don't cost very much at all. And it's really knowing where to go and knowing those brands, knowing who makes them, knowing, what you like and what you want to hear. Right.
I was watching the Steven Tyler interview just the other day talking about Sweet Emotion, and he was talking about the shaker sound at the beginning of this. And this is his claim. It's not a rumor anymore. He said that shaker at the beginning of Sweet Emotion is in fact a sugar packet.
Oh, really?
So there it is, right?
Free. One of the iconic intro sounds of all time from a free sugar packet. They probably got at Denny's or something.
Yeah. He also said that he broke the vibra slap because there's that virus slap at the beginning of it. If you listen closely, it stops abruptly, and he says because he broke it.
Okay.
It stayed in the master.
Yeah, well, hey, man, the end result is, and the ultimate thing that I tell all the students, and that you start to know over time, is it doesn't matter how expensive or how cheap or whatever your gear is. It only matters what it sounds like. And that's the beauty of music. Does it sound good? It is good. It doesn't matter what the theory is. It doesn't matter what instrument it is. It doesn't matter how expensive or cheap. It doesn't matter what it is. If it sounds good, it is good. I know. I've had so many stage performances where I did have those racks of gear. Yeah.
And maybe as a performer, I wasn't as focused on if I would have just had one or two boards. And really no one cared to see, the racks of gear up there, because I may have not performed as well as if I would have just had one or two, old standbys. Yeah. So it's really, really true. It's all about the sound, baby. Yeah. So talking about the sound a little bit, I want to go back to something you mentioned, that the really expensive synth, the Moog you were talking about, is a deductive synth. And then you were talking about the DX7 as an FM or frequency modulation synthesizer. What is the difference? What types are there, and what does that mean? What is it? Right. Well, I think in layman's terms, deductive synthesis is when you have an energy source, which is pure electricity, and which oscillates. And that's the kind of the fundamental of synthesis. The majority of synthesis that we know, we refer to as deductive synthesis. That's because you have this pure signal, and then you have a lot of things through the signal path that deduct that original waveform. Okay. So I can show you here on my Moog Voyager OS. We're going to start over here all the way on the left at the low frequency oscillator. And then from there, we can modulate, and modulate means change. We can change that LFO and change it through any source or destination or controller, and also modulate the amount of how much we're going to change that. This particular Moog has 3 oscillators, so I can adjust the octave of each of those and the waveform of each of those. And then in the center of the synthesizer, I have a mixer panel here, which you'll see I can mix however much of those oscillators I want into the final product. Now, the next bank here, and this is what I love about most synthesizers, and Moog does it very well, is called the filter section. And that's the number one knob that you'll hear, synthesizer players or any kind of new pop music. That's really what you notice about it, is the filter section. So the filter cutoff there, and then spacing, resonance, and et cetera. And then you've got the typical, what's known as ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, and release envelopes associated with the filter and the overall volume. So you've got every parameter that you can adjust at all with the Moog Voyager OS going from left to right. There are no menus. There's no menu diving. It's all right there, hands-on synthesizer control. And this is the classic synthesizer. And again, deductive, you're starting with an original oscillation and changing it, shaping it, whittling it down, just as a sculptor would carve, a great sculpting, right? And then it's all polished and finished at the end, and that's what you get. With FM, you're modulating the frequency of the wave. I will go as far as that right now, just because I don't want to say the wrong term, and there is a lot for me to brush up on with FM. Okay. But again, like I said, even the best of the best guys in the studios using the Yamaha DX7, the most famous of the FM synths, arguably, they were sticking with the presets. When you go in to edit this FM signal, instead of oscillators, they use what's called operators. And if you make one tweak, the whole sound kind of goes, whoa, out there, alien, So to get something on an FM synth that's palatable and usable in the context that you want could take a few hours, if not days. So I think that's why a lot of guys used the presets, and it's kind of the beauty of that instrument. It's like, wow, it's just like in an orchestra, an oboe is an oboe is an oboe, right? DX7 is a DX7. So yeah, but those are a couple of my favorites.
Are those the only 2? Are there others other than deductive and frequency modulation?
Oh, yeah. What's coming on very recently in the scene now is called granular synthesis. And if anyone's ever done any editing, and one of the programs I used to use back in the day was called Cool Edit Pro. And it was just, it never crashed. I used PCs back then, and it was just like Audacity now. You could zoom in on the waveform all the way until you would see the individual, more or less, pixels of the wave. And we call them grains instead of pixels in the audio world. Well, what granular synthesis does is it synthesizes each of those grains of the wave instead of a chunk of a waveform like deductive synthesis would, right? Instead of just the sawtooth pattern. Well, just in that one sawtooth from the apex going all the way down in the midline, you'll have all these individual grains within that wave. Well, granular synthesis is doing that now. Just the same as with camera technology, you're getting more and more megapixels, more and more, bits of data that you can kind of play with there. So
do that. Why would you want to do that? What does granular say? I mean, why would you want to have that kind of fine control like that?
Right. There's a benefit to it, just as the concept that there's a benefit to soft synths and, synthesizers that are in a lower price range, but you have the same more or less abilities in the box. And I'll do a demo here for you on one of my favorite multi-tap delays from IntelliGel called the Rainmaker. And what that does is it's a delay and a granular synthesizer all in one. craziest delay I've ever seen. It's a 16 multi-tap delay,
Whoa.
and it uses granular synthesis to create just endless drones that will completely morph on their own. It's a great product. I think it was about $700 from Intelligel, which is a Canadian company up in Vancouver, BC. But now kind of moving on now into modular synthesis, you've got most of my modular and Euro rack gear back there. That's been really hot on the market for the past 10 years or more. And, that takes those old big racks of Moog console synthesizers and shrinks them down to about half or a third. And that's why they call it Euro rack. It's smaller, more portable. You can fit way more panels in the same space and completely, truly customize your synthesizer sound.
Wow. That's really cool, man. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us.
It's been a while since I've talked about it, honestly. But it's great to be talking about something other than what's going on in the rest of the world, right?
Forget that nonsense, man. I don't even need. If you want to talk about that, you can go on another podcast.
School of Rock is music and life, and you can't have one without the other. So yeah,
that's right. Yeah, man.
Kind of a concept that I was always thinking of when I was learning about music from the beginning was what the efficiency, of my mindset was. And I think in the kind of academic world, they call it mental practice. And I was always trying to find a more efficient, a quicker, a more effective way to communicate what was being taught to me, process that, and then put it out again onto the piano keyboard. I've always been efficiency minded, and I've always kind of searched for a more efficient way. And with the way that School of Rock teaches, I don't think for me, my opinion, I don't think there is a more efficient way. And Chris, you've had a formal music education. I was taught theory basically out of the same books for the freshman, sophomore year of the Berklee students. Yeah. We know what we're talking about. And School of Rock is the bomb.
Absolutely, man. I'm so excited about the program. That's why I want to get involved in it. And having toured around the world and played music all over the place with lots and lots of really talented people, talking to them about their experiences and how they learned and the things that they find valuable about music, what's important about music, watching all these guys, Bobby McFerrin and Victor Wooten, talk about music as a language and how we're not really teaching music as a language, all of those things started to add up. And over time, I'm like, oh man, we're just teaching kids wrong. We're just doing it wrong. We're starting them out in this place where they think all of these things are important or true or real. And then by the time you get to be like a successful professional musician, then you're talking to guys on this level that's like, nah, not really. I started playing in the church with no music theory at all, and everybody around me spoke music, and that's how I learned. Or I started learning chords on my own, like you're talking about. I mean, time and time again, in real professional level musicians, that's the story you hear. Not I started out learning my Mary Had a Little Lamb, reading actual music notes from this book, and I had to learn scales first, and I had to learn all this. That is it's not nowhere, but it's a much less common story than I learned, by speaking, by doing, by practicing, by learning the songs that I love. And then later on, I was like, oh yeah, I guess there's also theory. I should probably learn that,
What's funny, Chris, is I would assume that there is a lot of parents or guardians that have reservations about School of Rock and the methodology because it's not traditional, because it's not purely traditional lessons and more geared to a conservatory possibly or academic style of approach. But I'll tell you, with my background, my wife, her maiden name is Kim Reese, and she was a very big name in the classical sax community, and had graduated with her second master's at Peabody from Johns Hopkins Peabody, and had even a Grammy nomination through the Oregon Symphony as a classical saxophonist. And the discussions that I've had with her as a former adjunct professor, and then me kind of like a street guy, when we talk about music, it's one and the same. When we talk about music philosophy and the the effort that she had to put forth through dedication and the practice room and, the most legitimate way of learning music, as opposed to my just learning by ear, being interested in it. It was more or less one and the same, I think, the amount of time that we put in it, and whether it was in mental practice or, facilitating, on your saxophone, on your horn.
Yeah.
But that I think that should put a lot of parents' minds at ease that even the conservatory style mindset can vouch for the methodology of School of Rock, because what more proof do you need? I'm married to a legitimate conservatory style musician, and we've really never had a disagreement about music. I think we can recognize different things when we're listening, but the conversations about music are always great. And I really respect that about her. And I think that's more proof that music is a universal language.
Right.
And the School of Rock methodology is just one very, very true, organic, powerful side of the most efficient way, in my opinion, to learn contemporary music.
I would say the difference between the experience your wife had, Kim, and I know Kim, awesome lady and fantastic player, man, really, really good. I've heard her play lots of times, really amazing, talented musician. I think if I had a guess, I haven't had as many conversations with her as you have, but I would say that I am impressed, maybe more impressed, that she stuck with it and became a successful musician. I'm more impressed and a little bit, I don't know, taken aback when people that start in this classical mindset actually end up as successful musicians versus people that learn by ear or learn by this song first methodology or learn by doing their passion. Those musicians not only stick with it longer and become successful more often, they also have many more options when they get there. They're not stuck in the one methodology. My wife, for instance, studied piano when she was young and played for many, many years, classical piano. And she, first of all, is not as appreciative of music as I am and other folks that are passionate about it because she didn't really want to do it that much. Her parents kind of made her do it and she had to study these things. She wasn't excited about it. She didn't have the passion. And so now later in life, she became very successful. She went all the way through all the methods they had in Japan. She grew up in Japan. She went all the way to the top of the top in high school and performed in recitals and competitions and did very well. And now basically doesn't play anymore because she was never excited about it. She was never motivated from the beginning. She never liked it and was forced to do these traditional lessons and never developed that passion, never developed that excitement for music, and now doesn't ever really use it at all and can't. And her main complaint, the reason she doesn't really do it is because it's not fun for her. She can't interact with other people. She has to have sheet music. She can only read music. She can't play with other musicians. She can't jam or just create on the spot or sit in with other musicians. So she doesn't have any of the social aspects. She doesn't have that interaction. She doesn't like it. She's not interested in it. So I have almost more respect for like Kim and other successful classical musicians because in my opinion, it's much more difficult to stick with that kind of a program. It's just harder. It's not fun. Often you're not excited about it. You're not passionate about it. Whereas, you and I and the School of Rock method, we teach that passion first. We teach the songs first. We access music from an angle, from a direction that is exciting and connects with the kids right away, connects with people. We have an adult program as well. And, connects with people on a fundamental level that you love it. You want to do it. You're passionate about it. And once you have that passion, that drive, that excitement, the teaching part almost becomes easy because the kids are like, oh, what can I learn? How can I do? I want to learn another song. I want to learn this one, here, and they're bringing songs to their teachers and they're bringing songs to us and they're bringing songs and they want to learn music. And then when they're all excited about it, they were like, oh, hey, by the way, that song is in the key of C and, it has these notes and here's the scale and here's how that's built. And they're like, yeah, cool. I want to know more because they're really excited about it. They're passionate about it already. So, I have the same thing with traditional and versus School of Rock stuff. It's not, I say versus, it's not really versus. It's just when you see the results, it becomes pretty clear who is going to stick with it longer, who's going to be more excited about it, who's going to bring music as part of their life and who's going to be at the end of the road. Like, let me get out of here, man. I never wanted to be here in the first place. I wasn't excited about it. My parents thought it was a good idea and it is a good idea, but you got to do it the right way.
Right. The conservatory style traditional approach that my wife, Kim, went through, she always said it was hard. She put in the hours when she lived in Baltimore. It was a tiny little studio apartment, I mean, it was the same kind of, starving artist experience that contemporary players have. I think the competition is really kind of equal when conservatory players like her, they say, there's only so many seats available for these spots. And unless somebody dies or gets fired, there just aren't jobs. I think the same way. I mean, I always wanted to be Billy Joel's keyboard player, Dave Rosenthal, but Dave Rosenthal's not going anywhere. And Billy Joel doesn't need anybody else, let alone me. But there's only a few spots, even in the pop world.
Yeah.
And then I love your wife, Maki. She's amazing. And I don't know how much money I would bet, but I'd probably bet my entire year's salary that she would not be as good of a psychologist that she is now, a professional in that arena, had she not have had music growing up. It was just so integral to her shaping her ethics and her mind and her communication. I mean, think of how effectively music can allow us to communicate with each other. You play a sad song, people are in a sad mood instantly. And that's powerful. And when you can apply that to anything that you do in life, it comes through.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It gives us different methods and different approaches for communication. It is a language and it teaches us that language. It makes those language connections. There's many, many scientists and neurologists and psychologists that have studied the effects of music on the brain. And that's one of the things they find. It functions as a language. It makes those connections. It helps us to adapt, to overcome, obstacles. When we're thinking about it, we're like, oh, how can I express this differently? How can I say this differently? How can we interact differently? How can we make this connection and make this work? So many ancillary benefits to music, man,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I dig it, man. I dig it. What other instruments do you play? I know that together I know that you sing, right? And do some vocals and background vocals and stuff. How did that come about? Did you always sing, or how did you start doing that?
I think there are two questions I always get asked from either an audience member or an interview like this. It's, what other instruments do you play? And I didn't even know there was a Navy band. Tell me about the Navy band. And I think every Navy or military musician gets asked that. But surprisingly, it is the most steady paycheck in the world to be a military musician. But what other instruments do I play? I don't. I play keyboards and sing. And that right there is the most... I don't want to say that I am the ideal keyboard player for a rock band, but when you can play a Hammond organ and clavinet, piano parts, electric piano, synthesizers, because those are all separate keyboard instruments. Just because they all have a keyboard doesn't mean it's the same approach.
Right.
When you can do that and have that scope of knowledge, and then also have the palette of genres that I was introduced to in the Navy, when you have that experience, and then when you can also sing while you play, in my view, you're a triple threat, and you can always get a gig in a band if you want.
Absolutely.
So I don't play guitar. When I've held a guitar, it's this, whatever you guys do. It's a disgusting feeling for me. And I love guitar players. I love them. They do it great. Keep going, guys. I'll do my thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's cool, man. You don't have to say it. I'll say you are a fantastic asset to any band. When we've played together, man, it's awesome. And exactly what you're saying. Maybe can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, how those are three separate instruments, and then really the vocals on top of that. Like, how does it work to try and plug those different sounds in,
What's funny is whenever you're on a sports team or a School of Rock, you've got to be a team player. I have always loved the idea of doing that. And I think organically, I was always starved for it, being an only child. I always wanted to be a team player. I had my first jam session when I was in 6th grade. Me and a kid, he was on drums, and we jammed on Space Oddity by David Bowie. And I was playing with someone else. It was crazy cool. And
Yeah.
if I would have had School of Rock growing up like these kids do now, yeah, no telling. I would be leaps and bounds even above where I am today.
Yeah.
But I really wanted the team kind of aspect, and I couldn't find it. It wasn't as available to me. How did I get into singing? Yeah, I was reluctant at first. It was actually my dad who kind of raised the question because I was so into the Piano Man guys, Billy and Elton. And and he was like, if you just sing while you're playing, like you will really up your level. And I knew that, and I was very reluctant and hesitant. And I kind of got started, I want to say, at the tail end of elementary school age, going into junior high. So what would I have been? Maybe 9, 10? How old are you in fifth grade? About
10-ish, somewhere in that area.
12, around that area. And I started singing along with the piano. And that's when the digital pianos really became popular. This was right around 97, 98. And I was like, parents, I really want a digital piano. It has a mic input. I can change sounds. I can record while I'm playing. And this was 22 years ago. That digital piano was $6,000 back then. So they're much more affordable now, and what you can do with recording and playing and singing and all that. But I was like, this would really, really help me. And it did. And I was on that thing my entire high school time, all of junior high for 7 years. I was on that Roland KR 575 digital piano and playing and sing along to the Elton John karaoke disc and Billy Joel karaoke disc. And then, of course, when I became a little bit more confident with my singing, even just accompanying myself, I started getting into choir a little bit late, but I got into it. There were 7 choirs at my high school. I got the top one my junior year. I had a barbershop quartet all throughout high school for 4 years. We won some awards and did some pretty cool gigs. Being around Indianapolis, we sang at the Indy 500.
Wow.
Couple of football game events. A lot of singing. I was the president of the barbershop chorus also. I accompanied choirs. There was just, if I hadn't sang, if my dad hadn't kind of pushed me to get out of that comfort zone and start singing while I played, then I would have been much, much, much more limited in my musical skills going on. And, now when I can ride on top of a vocalist and just support them, it's like invaluable. They would have to hire a whole nother person, if not two, to do what I can do on my own with programming too. So it's really been great. And that's one of the very few things that my dad did really well.
Yeah, man, that caught onto something as well, man. We were talking earlier a little bit about being a team player and fitting in to the group and that kind of stuff. A lot of folks outside of music, outside of the band, or who go, regular consumers of music, have seen bar bands, have seen performances and stuff. You always notice the guy out front, or the gal out front, the person in the front of the band, front man, woman, whatever, right? Or the lead guitar player, or somebody who's singing out front, whatever. That role gets so much attention and gets so much notoriety that you almost forget that it's more important to have a supporting band and supporting sound people and supporting light guys and supporting road crews and supporting all of these roles that are so integral to making any performance happen. That team really makes it work, and it's hard, I think, looking from the outside, not knowing about bands, never being in a band, never, for regular consumers to understand how important those roles are. So can you talk a little bit about the keyboardist role and how that works and like the team playing aspect a little more?
Absolutely. And it's really cool that the keyboardist role can be as much or as little as the group or the group leader or the front person really wants. I've kind of established a reputation with me where people are cool with really anything I do. And I love having that luxury as tailoring my role and just having a lot of fun with it. One of the kind of primary or principal things that I do, or I listen to as the rest of the band is playing, is how can I add the main thing that's missing?
Mm.
And I start with that. So I listen to it and I'm thinking, well, is everything there already in the mix? Or what is the one thing right off the bat that I know is missing?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's harmony in a register other than the guitar. Most contemporary groups have a guitar and a keyboard, and the guitar is playing within these 2.5 or 3 octaves. And I could play in a register just slightly below or slightly above, or on both sides of what that guitarist is doing. Sometimes we'll even play in the same register or together on a lick together. There's a lot of different situations that happen depending on the song. But I listen for what's missing first. And a lot of times, if I just stick to that, everybody's happy. It's like, okay, all the different pieces of the pie are there. Cool. A lot of times, the transitional elements of a song are left up to the drummer and maybe a rhythm guitar or a lead guitar. Very rarely are the transitional elements of a song like going from a chorus to a bridge or a verse to a chorus. They're really never in the vocals because the vocals are singing the melody. Right. And they're not usually in the bass because they have more of a fundamental role. But a lot of times there's a rhythm lick or a lead lick that is just not a transitional element. That when those drums are doing that fill into that next section, there's something missing there. So a lot of times what I like to do is play an alternative progression that transitions harmonically into that next section. So the listener is like, okay, something new is happening in the song. I'm about to get ready for it properly before it happens. Yeah. There's song examples where if those transitional elements aren't there, even just in that half a bar or a bar, and it's just chorus, bridge, right, the audience is weirded out, the band is weirded out, it just doesn't feel right. So that's kind of maybe the secondary thing I look for. And then a lot of times, if things are really happening very well in the group, sometimes I'll just go for a texture, right? I'll be like, okay, the harmony is all there. We've got 2 guitarists, for example. All the rhythm is there. I think it just needs like some texture, and then I might, pull out my organ and I'll just get some real grit in there or something like that, or a synthesizer kind of ostinato pattern, something like that. And a lot of times I'll have my guitarist friend look at me and he'll be like, wow, that is crazy weird. It fits perfectly. Thank you. So the role is so drastic and it varies so much. And then also as a keyboard player, you get your chance to shine mostly at the intros of these pop tunes when you're playing a Charlie Puth cover or something like that, where it's all keyboard driven, or maybe Bruno Mars, and the intro is just all you, and you get to use your best, stage piano sound and program. Yeah. I tend to like Yamahas. They're a little bit brighter, and it's just in stereo, it's full, and it's a great feeling, The only times that I've been unhappy with my role in the band is when it was just a bad band. And I have to say, as a professional, there are bad bands, and that's just how it is. Yeah. Most of the time I've been in at least a band where I could find a way to be happy. And then in a lot of cases too, I've been in great bands with you too, Chris. But if you're just struggling and you're not happy with your role, you're not happy with the other members of the group, you don't like how it sounds, and you don't have much control over that, unfortunately, that's just a bad band. And, sometimes you play on bad soccer teams too. That's just life. But I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. And touching on that balance piece a little bit too, you have that role where sometimes you step out front and you're playing the intros, you're playing the leads, you're playing some part, and then knowing when it's time to play the meat of the song, knowing when it's time to not play, knowing when it's time to cut out and this vocalist has their part, or it's the drum solo or whatever it is, that balance is the most important thing to strike, knowing your role, knowing when it's the time to do what part of the song is this? What can I add here? What can I do?
I love it. And it's easy for guitarists in my view, because you guys, man, there's two things. What are you doing? Playing lead, you're playing rhythm, or you're playing solo. You're playing solo, you jack the level up ×2 and go out front. You're playing rhythm, you come back to the stage and drop your level by half.
Yeah.
And that's just plain and simple, right out there, rolls. I love it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And then the soccer team or the team analogy, it's very appropriate. I was watching that. They just dropped recently the Bulls. Did you see that? The Bulls documentary thing about Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen, the 90s Bulls where they went.
That was a great piece. That was really well put together.
And how important it is to have the whole team, to have all of those players, all of those people. It would not have happened with any one of those guys really without missing those guys. They have to have those roles, and they have to know what their roles are and do what they do well. And it's important to know that in a band, in a sports team, in life, in a business relationship, in a personal relationship, in a friendship, everything is about balance and about knowing when to do what. And if you're not happy with your role, if you don't like your role, then you can change it. But it comes from understanding that first. What is my role? What am I supposed to do here? What are we trying to accomplish? And how do we get there? And how can I help that happen? If you don't like it, you can change it. But if you don't know what it is, if you don't recognize where it is, that's more difficult, because then you're kind of unhappy. You don't know, like you were talking about in bands. It's like, I don't know where, maybe it's a bad band. They don't know their role. That to me, when you say bad band or you say bad stuff, it's like the connotation, what comes to my mind in my experience is like, people don't know what they're doing. They don't know, they may be comparable players performance wise on their own, but they don't know why they're there. They don't know what the mission is. They don't know that balance. They don't know that piece. And teaching that social interaction piece, which we do at School of Rock, which we love at School of Rock, understanding that the vocalist, the front person, that person in front is going to get a lot of the notoriety. But inside the band, internally, we all know that as much as people come up after the show and talk to the lead guitar player or the vocalist or whoever they like, everyone in that band contributed to that performance. Everyone in that band contributed to those people loving that show enough to come up and talk to you afterwards, or come up and say, hey, good job. I really like your singing. Well, you like your singing because the keyboards were there and the harmony was there and the drums were there. You can sing all day long if the band isn't on key, if the band is not performing. So internally at School of Rock and in bands that we've been in and bands that we've been in separately as well, you understand that this is the most important part, that we know what we're doing, that we have our balance, that we have our roles, that we understand where we're going and what our mission is,
It's really funny too, the wisdom that I've gotten from being in such a huge variety of groups with all different kinds of personality dynamics. Looking back, even the worst bands that I've been in, they were bad because generally people were trying to do too much. And it's funny, there was never any bad intent in any of these bands, but it was good people trying to do too much to, help things more. Right. And whether they were locked in that mindset or someone told them to be that way, or for whatever reasons, the intent was always good, but the product that came out of that was bad.
Right.
So it's really, and we always had this phrase to check the ego at the door. I think when you're in a board meeting maybe, or in a rehearsal, or whenever you have to get together as a group, it's kind of like, hey, leave your ego out of it and make a self-sacrifice for the greater good of what the product is going to be. And when that's not there, then I think that's a problem. But in the majority of the times, everyone wanted to do the best they could, and sometimes that was too much. It's really funny how that is. So in music, it's generally just a lot of great people.
That's pretty true, especially if they are really musicians, if they're really excited about music. The people that I've run into the most, the individuals I've run into in music that I didn't really get along with, or that seemed to be kind of not happy to be there, or rude or whatever, often I think they did not appreciate their own role and where they were in their life. Like they didn't like to be there. They weren't happy being there. And somehow they felt trapped, that they couldn't get out, that they couldn't do anything else. They're just stuck, I think. And that contributes a lot to you, whether you're satisfied or unsatisfied with a band, like you were talking about. If you can find your role, if you can find your place, even if the band is maybe not the best, you can contribute in a way that makes you personally okay. And when you're doing that, at least you're adding one positive energy to something that may or may not have any positive energy at all, And
I'll go back to my background again. Like, I'll say it, I wish I would have had School of Rock when because I did have a couple of years of piano lessons.
Mm-hmm.
I've always equated that to really no more than babysitting. Mm-hmm. I would bring in, lead sheets and chord charts and jazz books and be like, hey, look what I can do. And the teacher would look at me for a half an hour and say, that's great. And what did I get out of that? That was a lot of money wasted. If I would have had a band to jam with, at that same time, wow, that would have been a completely better experience for me. So even in those lessons, I didn't want to be there. The teacher didn't want to be there with me. It just wasn't a good fit. School of Rock would have been a good fit,
Lessons only work. Learning only works. Schooling only works. Teaching only works when there's some goal at the end, when there's some reason that you're there. If you're taking lessons and sitting in your room practicing scales and you're never going to play with anyone else, you're never going to perform, you're never going to get on stage, you're never going to do any of that stuff, you can be motivated in the beginning. And some kids they're like, oh, I'm going to learn music. It's going to be great. A month goes by, 2 months go by, 6 months go by. None of us have the stamina to keep that up with no payoff, right? When there's nothing to do, you're not there with your peers, you're not there with your friends, you're not putting on performances. That's why School of Rock's performance-based education, where we put kids on stage in real live venues in front of their friends, in front of the parents, in front of whoever they want, whoever they invite, that is the payoff. And we do that frequently throughout the year. We're doing several shows a year, several shows per season, and we're doing multiple seasons per year. I mean, those are the experiences that keep you motivated, because you're like, man, I'm going to play, I'm going to perform, I better learn my parts, I'm going to get in there and enjoy this. And it gives you that, how if it weren't for the Olympics, how motivated do you think those Olympic athletes would be? Still be in shape. They like exercise, right? But to push yourselves, like if there weren't for the Olympics, do you think we would have broken the 4-minute mile? Do you think we would have done these things, like made these hallmarks? Maybe not, because people would have been like, yeah, 4 minutes, nobody can do it. There's no competition. Nobody's really trying to do it. So it's that payoff. It's that result. It's that performance that really motivates you, because you have a goal. You have something you're working towards. It's not just spinning your wheels in your room every day, practicing scales you don't want to be practicing anyway. Lessons work. They're important. It's an important part of the learning process to have a mentor, an instructor, a teacher. But the thing that makes it work, the rubber on the road, is a goal, a performance, a something at the end,
I'm really excited for the kind of minority that's pushing majority of music students or kids that struggle, unfortunately, with performance anxiety. Mm-hmm. And something that's come to the forefront in at least the last 3 to 4 decades has been production and drum programming. And one of my favorite drum machines is the Electron Digitact. And it is a drum sampler and also a synthesizer all in one. It's a great, great product. And it's a professional product. I think it retails still for about $700. But this machine, you can do any kind of drum programming that you hear from artists like The Weeknd or Katy Perry, Billie Eilish. You can program whatever you want with this particular piece of gear, and it's got a lot of stay power. It's been on the market for a little while. But anyway, for the kids that have performance anxiety, or they want to be a part of the final product, but they don't want to perform in that traditional role on stage, electronic music is, of course, huge right now. Yeah. And I think it's a great avenue for kids to find. And I think through programs like School of Rock, whether or not they have a dedicated DJ instructor or electronic musician, I think that's something you're never going to get anywhere else one-on-one with the safety, of the corporation of School of Rock to kind of, shelter that.
Oh yeah, we're all in on that, man. We're setting up a recording studio, which a lot of the School of Rocks don't have. So School of Rock is a franchise. Most people probably already know that, but there are 260 schools around the world, most of which do not have recording studios. That they do some recording, they do some stuff. They try to provide that for the students as much as possible, but not everyone has a tech that can do that. Not everyone has someone that's passionate or interested about that. I've always loved recording music. I've been doing it since I was like 11 years old. My pops got me this little standalone VS 1880 recording, little 8-track. It was 16 track, but you had to like double them. And anyway, old piece of gear. And I've always loved it, and that's a big part of what we are going to do at School of Rock. Recording, teaching kids how to record, just like we were talking about earlier, the 1% or increasing your performance by 5%. Think about the difference in your YouTube video for these kids, right? That are YouTube, streaming on Twitch, whatever it is that they choose to do. If you can up your game by, hey, I got an input. I'm not just using the mic on my laptop. I bought a $150 Focusrite preamp, like it's $150. Some of them you pay $200, you get a whole package, man. You get the mic, you get the cables, you get the hookups, you get everything you need. I would say that's more like 10 to 20% increase over just a laptop mic. And all you have to do is the one thing. You set up this little mic, even a USB mic, even the Blue Yeti, or like these things that, a couple $100, and you can completely change your game, completely up your performance and set yourself apart from all these other people that are doing the same thing in this digital age. It makes a huge difference. And I want to be able to provide that to the students, and not at this like, you got to have this Neve console. It's like multi-million dollars in this studio. That's great. I would love to have a multi-million dollar studio. That's not, one, realistic. And two, you're never going to see that. That's not important for kids. Like if you get to that level where you're seeing those boards, you've come through so many levels that by the time you get to that studio with that board, you're ready for that. What we need and what we do and what we're providing is this is some pro level gear that is intuitive and accessible to students of all ages, and you can start on it and grow with it, and you're going to know how to up your game immediately and also over time incrementally, so that you can eventually achieve these really, really great results. You'll get a nice boost in the beginning to keep you motivated, and you'll get these results over time where you're like, man, I'm learning about EQ, I'm learning about channel strips, I'm learning about how to use limiters and how to up my recording, my mic game, and also video. We want to web stream, we want to do Twitch streams, we want to do this stuff. How do we do that? What do we do? How, that's a very important part of what we are at our school incorporating in there. We have a full recording studio and are teaching recording and electronic arts topics, different topics on recording, on synthesis as well. We have camps and workshops on all these different topics so that kids can learn exactly what they want. We want to support the music and their performance. We also want them to be able to share that with their friends, record it, play it back. All of that stuff is just as important as performance, because it's that motivation piece. If they can share it with their friends, if there's an end result of a performance or recording, it's going to keep them motivated.
It was really funny in the past 5 years for my listening focus and my personal, education, my listening, my learning, from that to be focused from the guys that were older to me. It flipped to the guys that are now younger than me being 35 now, and Jacob Collier being one. It's like the younger people are now kind of leading it for where my age group is. And it's so great because at School of Rock, the instructors are all good, organic, open-minded people that'll be like, hey, if I could learn from anything before, I can still learn one or two things from these students that are immersed in this stuff, that have the passion, that are coming and bringing me things like this and that. It's like, wow, okay, I'd heard of that, but I should dig more into that, right? Electronic music is a perfect example. So it's awesome.
Yeah, they're really driving the boat from the back, if you want to think about it that way. They're coming up behind us, but they're directing where that boat's going to go. They're like the rudder, they're all the way in the back. They're young, but they're pointing the direction to where the future is going to go, and paying attention to that's really important, That's right. Drew, man, I really appreciate you for your time today. Thanks for joining me. It's been a really great conversation. And that's Drew Williams. We're going to have him coming by the school to do some guest instruction. We're going to have some camps and workshops with him. So make sure you guys are checking us out. Again, it's at SOR Santa Ana. That's Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. School of Rock Santa Ana. You can Google us and check us out. You're probably already following us if you see this video, but if not, go ahead and give us a follow, give us a like. I really appreciate that. And check in the future for Drew to be coming down and teaching us more about synthesis. And you guys can learn everything there is to know about synthesis. So thanks for joining me, Drew. I appreciate you, man. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.